All right, so good afternoon, y'all. So we are going to talk about food today. So that's why I highly suggest that you grab yourself a snack or some food to get you through the session, because I always get hungry for this great session here. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and introduce Anna so we can go ahead and get started, okay? So Anna Bermudez is the Chief Curator at the Museum of Ventura County in Ventura, California. Her interests are in researching the history of the Mexican American community, specifically in the areas of food, culture, and recreation. She has received various awards for her work from organizations such as the Latino Town Hall, the Mexican Consulate, and the City of Ventura. She has co-authored 3 books on Mexican American baseball with her friend and colleague, Dr. Jose Alamillo and Dr. Richard Santillan. She continues to work on a cookbook of Mexican American recipes. She is currently working for the Smithsonian's National Museum of American History as a West Coast researcher on the food production and distribution during the pandemic. She is also working with the Smithsonian Latino Center on researching artifacts for the opening of the Molina Family Gallery, the first national Latino gallery on the National Mall. That's a big deal. I'm so glad that they have you on board, Ana, because I know that you know what you're doing and you're going to make sure we are represented well. Muchísimas gracias for joining us once again. Thank you everybody for being here. Make sure that you are muted unless you're going to ask a question. And so I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to you, Ana. Oh, let me give you permission to share your screen. My apologies. Okay, there you go.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Good afternoon. I know it's getting close to dinner time, so I hope you have your snacks with you. Okay, let me go ahead and share my screen.
Remember to keep your chat open, everyone.
Okay. Okay, let's see. I'm gonna try that again.
Only because it was at the end of your slideshow. That's why I had a blink, but just
that's right. Okay, I can go. Yeah, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So then I go back to. So, okay, how do you know? Okay, Veronica, how do I get back to the beginning without going through all the slides?
Okay, so actually go ahead and unshare your screen.
Okay, and then just go ahead.
And then, yeah.
Then do it. I get it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Okay, so then now how do I find you again?
How do you find me? Okay, click on your Zoom little app. Do you have your Zoom app at the bottom of your computer's menu? There
no,
you
it's
go.
Not, okay, no, it's not coming up yet.
Oh, you don't see the Zoom screen at all?
No. Okay, wait a minute. No.
Any of your tabs on top? Usually, like on my computer, I have the Zoom app on the bottom of my menu with the rest of my apps.
Okay, yeah, that's what it should be. Yeah, but it's not coming up. I don't know why.
How about maybe any of the
no. It's this one. Sorry, guys.
That's okay.
Okay. Okay. All right, so I'm gonna try that again.
There we go.
Okay.
Yay.
Okay,
All right.
thanks for being so patient. This is only my second time.
It's all good.
Okay, so the title of this talk today is Mexican Immigration and How It Changed Foodways in Ventura County. And good afternoon to you all, or good evening. I'm Anna Bermudez, and I am Chief Curator at the Museum of Ventura County. And I'm very honored to have been asked to do this by my friend and hermana Veronica Valadez. Thank you so much. And thank you all for taking part of your dinner hour to come to class and listen about food. Okay, so foodways, what a big word. It's very now, it's very hip. So what does that mean exactly? So in social science, the cultural, social, and economic practices relating to the production and consumption of food. So I like Urban Dictionary's description better. It describes a foodway as not only the things that people do and do not eat, but why they eat them or not. And not to mention the traditions and history that help define that culture. So it is interesting to know what we eat and why we eat it. So we're going to be talking about foodways and how they've changed how people eat in Ventura County, or how they ate. So I think it's pretty clear that immigration by other peoples influenced the way that we ate and continue to eat in our county and elsewhere in the country. So let's see what that looks like. Let's see. So we're going to be looking at what's happening in Ventura County and referencing what's happening in Southern California. And as this definitely had the trickle-down effect in Ventura County. And I want to stress that I'm not going to give you a history of Mexican food in the United States. There are other people that have written books about that, including Gustavo Arellano Miranda, who wrote Taco USA, How Mexican Food Conquered America. This isn't what it's about. We're going to keep it strictly local because Ventura County is unique, and there's some interesting things that were happening here. So as other lecturers before me have done, I'm going to tell you a little bit about myself so that it puts things in context. So I'll tell you a little bit about myself and my family. My mother and father's family both came from Guanajuato, from the village of Chichimequillas in the municipality of Silao. And my mother's family left just before the revolution in 1907. My grandfather was a chauffeur for a very wealthy family, and my grandmother was very, very poor, lived with her mother and two sisters, and they did catering for weddings and baptisms and that kind of thing to make ends meet. So in 1907, they left with their 6 children. They paid 3 cents to cross the border into El Paso, Texas on the EPE, that's the El Paso Electric Railway. And my grandfather began to look for work right away in El Paso, and he was sent to Kansas to become a traquero, which is someone that works a railroad worker, and he was laying track in Clearwater, Kansas. So here are my grandparents. Here's some of the families that were living in Clearwater at the time. You can see the railroad boxcar. These are what the living situation was there. That's what they lived in. So I put it as a heading for this slide, the first commingling of Chinese Mexican cuisine in our family. So what's happening with the Chinese Exclusion Act of 1882 and immigration being made permanently illegal in 1902, there were very few Chinese left to work on the railroad. But I always wondered, and you'll see the bag of Calrose white rice at the top of the screen. So Mexican rice is typically made with long grain rice, but my grandmother never had anything except what she would call blue rose type rice. And this is Calrose white rice, which is what I use right now. So it's a short grain. This is a medium grain rice. She used a short grain rice to make her rice. Why? Because that's not what you do in Mexico. That's not what she grew up with. Well, there were Chinese living in the boxcars along with the Mexican families. There were a few Chinese workers there. This is the rice that they could get in Clearwater, Kansas. They could get short grain or medium grain rice. So this is what my grandmother learned to cook with when she came to the United States. And we still use it in our families today. So they lived in a boxcar up and down the Santa Fe Railroad line in Clearwater with other Mexican families, a few Chinese. And the picture that you see at the bottom are the families that they left behind. This picture was taken the day that my grandparents and their children left Kansas and went back to Texas. So they left Clearwater, Kansas, went back to Texas, and my grandfather went to work on a ranch in Lorain, which is a small cattle town, and that's all there was just cows and dirt and ranches there. And he went to work putting up fences, and ended up breaking his collarbone and couldn't work. So my grandmother decided to start making tortillas to sell door to door. So my uncles, who were both young boys then, started hustling and selling tortillas door to door so they could make ends meet, and took care of the family while my grandfather recuperated. It was also during this time that my grandmother was summoned to the kitchen of the rancher's wife, and she taught her how to bake bread. And my grandmother in turn taught her how to make tortillas. So it was a nice exchange, and you can see there's starting to be a commingling of foods here at this time, at least in my family. So the family decides to move to California, and at the urging of family and friends, they stayed with family in Riverside. There was a lot of citrus. The citrus industry was big, so my grandfather worked picking oranges, and they finally made the move to Fillmore in 1912 at the urging of friends and compadres, where he found work in the field. So what was growing in Ventura County at that time? Lima beans, lots and lots of lima beans, and the citrus industry was just beginning to take shape and was beginning their boom. So what they were eating was based on what was there. That impacted what they were eating was impacted whatever crops were available and what they could grow. So the family lived in the labor camp in Fillmore when they first moved there. It was called La Cucaracha. And in late 1912, early 1913, we can't find a specific date on this. There was lots of rain in Fillmore, and it flooded the banks of Pole Creek, where this labor camp was located, and destroyed the camp. So the people working in the labor camps moved into town, into an area that was then called the Barrio. The Barrio in Fillmore had two sections, one on either side of the railroad tracks. One was the Barrio de las Flores, or the neighborhood of flowers. And on the other side of the track, you had El Barrio Santo, the holy neighborhood, because there were a lot of churches located there. So they lived in Fillmore. There's a picture of a house on the bottom right of your screen, and that was the home that my grandparents lived in. That was their first home in Fillmore. And as they worked picking lima beans and citrus in Fillmore, my grandfather saved money, and he saw a lot on the corner of Mountain View and Main Street in Fillmore. And he decided that he would build a grocery store there. So he built a grocery store there. It had a full basement downstairs that served as a community room for the residents of the barrio, and they would have meetings of mutualistas, or mutual aid societies, which were clubs that were aiding the Mexican immigrants that came into the United States. There's a whole story behind the mutualistas, and I can talk more about that at a later date. So the store that they had was run by my two uncles, and they sold products from home, from Mexico, as well as local staples. Unfortunately, in the 1930s, because of the Depression, my grandparents lost the store, and so it was back to field work from there. So let's see. So did I miss this? I guess I didn't. So we're going to talk about what's going on during this time. So in the late 1800s, in Ventura, the Ortega family is living in a small adobe on the west side of the city. And we have the Ortegas had 11 children, and Emilio was the 11th child of that family. So he decides that he's going to go to New Mexico as a young man. So he goes to New Mexico, and he finds out how they roast chilies. So he learns how to fire roast chilies, and he brings that technique back to Ventura. and a new business is born, the Pioneer Chili Company, that later becomes Ortega chilies that I'm sure you've all seen on the shelves at the grocery stores. So it's a great industry. It's a small building right next to the very small adobe that they're living in. And eventually they build a bigger building down on Ventura Avenue, and it becomes a huge employer for the city. So green chili salsa. But the interesting thing about the Ortega chili is that it's advertised as Spanish chili salsa. Well, if you know anything about Spanish food, they don't eat chilies and they don't use chili salsa. So, but it's what's happening during this time. So this photograph that we have here is actually a one from our collection at the museum. And it's a photograph across, this is actually across the street from the museum. This is the old Camarillo adobe. And it is, this photograph is from, let me double check on that. It was taken in 1890. So the card catalog for this reads, Old Camarillo adobe, Spanish Quarter, Main Street and Ventura Avenue, 1890, adobe buildings, Restaurante Mexicano located in this building. Well, there was no Spanish Quarter in Ventura. This is where the Mexicans and the Indians lived. But it says Spanish because it's just a more palatable word for everyone to use during this time. Who's going to this restaurant? Is it Anglos that are going here? No, this is for Indians and Mexicans that live in the area. What are they serving? Probably something cheap and substantial, caldos, soups, cocidos, anything like that that they can keep simmering for days, and they can sell it cheap and it's hearty enough for people to keep, you know, their bellies filled. So this is happening here. Later on, you have, this area was actually known as Indian Town and Mexican Town. It's interesting that they use the word Spanish Quarter for this. So this is actually probably the first restaurant in Ventura County, Restaurante Mexicano.
Was that in the Tortilla Flats area?
Yes, it is. Definitely in Tortilla Flats area.
Gotcha.
Of course. Okay, so we have food as a tool, the restaurant boom and the real estate boom. So the mission revival movement. So the missions that were built in the 1700s are starting to go in some kind of a state of decay in the late 1800s. So they need to do something about it so that they can get people into California. They want to bring tourism here. They want more people to move out here. They want people to move to California. There are a lot of people in California, but they're Mexican and they're Indian, and they want Midwesterners. They want white people here. How do you get white people here when you've got a state full of Mexicans and Indians and some Spanish? Well, you have to make it sound beautiful and wonderful. So there's something called the Mission Revival Movement, which started as an architectural movement and became a whole cultural thing. So they've got the architecture, homes, buildings are being built in that mission style with the tiled roofs, you know, the earth tones, etc. But that's not enough to get people here. So Charles Lummis, who is a journalist with the LA Times, and Colonel Harrison Gray Otis, who's a publisher of the Times, they reinvent the cultural legacy of California. So you have two white men creating this culture so that people will come and stay. Not just to visit, they want people to stay here. So the Anglo community is usurping the style, culture, and the food of Mexico, but they don't really want Mexico. They want Spain. They want everything to be Spanish. So what's happening is they decide to advertise these lovely things, they you know, palm trees and the great climate, etc. But what do you do about all these little tamale stands and taco stands that they have in Los Angeles, especially? Well, there's not a whole lot you can do. These are, and they're considered greasy and dirty. So what happens is you get rid of them. So they got rid of all these taco carts and tamale carts that they had, and they are encouraging restaurant owners that have Mexican restaurants to change their menus up. So along with your albóndigas, you can also get vegetable soup. And you have a few Mexican food choices, main dishes, chile rellenos, enchiladas, etc. But you can have rice or spaghetti. You know, spaghetti is nothing near Mexican. I've never had spaghetti, you know, in a Mexican restaurant here. And you can have tortillas, or you can have bread. And I'm not talking bolillos or Mexican rolls. I'm talking white sliced bread. So all of a sudden the menus change and they're made more palatable for American tastes. Restaurants are cleaned up, and rice is called Spanish rice. This is Spanish food. These are not Mexican restaurants. These are Spanish restaurants. And there are still some restaurants around that have the word Spanish in them, Spanish table, Spanish this, whatever it was. Because why is this? Well, first of all, Spanish is romantic. It's European. And Mexican is dirty and greasy. So this is what you want to pull away from. What's happening in Ventura County and the surrounding region? Well, first of all, in Santa Barbara in 1924, you have Old Spanish Days. And what is it? It's a lot of white men and women that decide that they're going to promote the Spanish culture in Santa Barbara as a visitor's tool. So to get people here to live and also to visit the area. So Spanish Days is a very anglicized cultural appropriation tool created to bring visitors into Santa Barbara and to bring people from the Midwest into Santa Barbara to live. It's an interesting thing. And it continues to this day. And if you notice Spanish Days or Fiesta in Santa Barbara, it's just a lot of white people. And as one of my colleagues said, in the early days, if you wanted to join Spanish Days, or if you wanted to be part of that, what was going on with Spanish Days, you had to be Anglo, unless you had money. Then if you were Mexican, you might be invited to join in the celebration in some way. So it's an interesting situation. So what's going on in Ventura? Well, Rosa Ramirez is a housewife living off the avenue in Tortilla Flats. And she's making enchiladas to feed her family, and she's sharing with her neighbors, etc. And some of the neighborhood women tell her, "Hey, your enchilada sauce is amazing. You need to do something about this. You need to market this. This is great." So Rosa Ramirez tells her husband, and her husband goes to Mr. Farad, who owns a general store down on Main Street and Ventura Avenue, and says, this is why my wife's enchilada sauce, and we need to market this. Can you help? So they formed Ramirez and Farad and the Las Palmas Chili Sauce Company, or the Chili Company. So all of a sudden you have two big names that have come out of Ventura right there, Las Palmas Chili and Ortega Chili Company, both of them still on the market shelves today all over the world. So, but you're making it palatable for American taste. So as you can see, the Las Palmas label that's on your screen, it says Enchiladas Americana, because, here you are, very basic things. And understand that the Las Palmas enchilada sauce at this point in time is being manufactured to suit American taste. It's not like the enchilada sauce you buy right now, because I buy Las Palmas all the time, and it's even a little spicy for me once in a while. This is very bland, very bland. You've got a lot of tomato sauce mixed in with that. And if you can see the other label that's on your screen, it talks about the Spanish recipes or Spanish cooking. So again, you're pushing this as Spanish food, not as Mexican food. So let's talk about rice, because we talk about rice a lot during this hour. So again, like I said before, back in the day, Mexican food was not well received by the Anglos living in the area, and Mexican restaurant owners and business people had a way of making this more palatable. So how did arroz become Spanish rice? Well, we just talked about that as well. The fact that we're trying to get people to come here, and Spanish is great and Mexican isn't. So we changed the culture of Southern California to make it a more marketable place to live and to bring people here. Unfortunately, this continues to this day. It's 100 years later, and we still have restaurants and fast food places that are talking about Spanish rice And as I was telling the last class, Taco Bell has something on their menu. It's not Spanish rice, but it's called Latin rice. Same thing, Mexican rice, cultural appropriation. But again, you're making it for all, so that it's not just, you know, I don't know. I don't know why this continues, but it's something that I continue to fight with local restaurants, and hopefully someday we'll get that Spanish rice label off of there. During the early 1900s and 1920s, you had in the Barrios families that had gardens. You had lots of gardens. Everybody had a backyard garden. As I was telling the class before, my grandmother brought seeds with her from some of her favorite herbs and plants. When she crossed the border into Texas, she kept some of these plants with her, grew plants, and you continue to share with your neighbors. You share all these things with your neighbors. So you're building community by having family gardens. You're sharing what you have. People are poor, they're working hard, and they're getting very little pay. So you don't have a lot of money to be buying fresh vegetables and fresh fruit. So people are planting and growing and sharing and building community, sharing the bounty of their backyards. So this is the Holy Trinity. This always grows in my garden. It grew in my grandmother's garden. It grew in my mother's garden. You have oregano, mejorana, and tomillo, oregano, marjoram, and thyme. This is the bouquet garni of Mexico, of the Mexicano. We use this in all our cooking. You use this for pozole, you used it for menudo, you use it for albóndigas. This is what you use. And this has changed up a bit over time. But I remember growing up whenever we had menudo or anything, if you didn't have oregano, you use the dried oreganos if you didn't have the fresh. So this is very important. This was always in family gardens. The barrio became a refuge for everyone. You had residents of all types. Who was living in the barrio? Mexicanos, of course, right? The Mexicans were living in the barrio. Well, not just the Mexicans. If you look different, if you were a person of color, no matter what you were living in the barrio, because nobody's going to let you rent or buy a home anywhere else in any of these small towns around Ventura County. So in the barrio in Fillmore, you had Mexicans, you had Chinese, you had Japanese, you had Greeks, you had Syrians living, and this is 1920s, 1930s. So you have a variation in cuisine, and people are sharing because that's what people do in the barrio. This is what builds a community. You share. So I have pita in the barrio on your screen. My grandmother learned how to bake pita bread from the Rabbani family, who were Syrians living in the barrio in Fillmore. So she would come home with what she called the biggest tortillas she had ever seen. They were huge pita loaves. And then she in turn taught them to make the smaller corn tortillas with her masa. And they also made flour tortillas as well. So you're sharing things. Asian cuisine. We had, my grandfather had his market on one corner. The Inodomi family, the Japanese family that was living in the barrio at that time, had their market on the other corner. On the next block was a Mr. Nakano with another Japanese market. And there were Chinese living in the barrio as well. So what's happening? Well, I grew up with a bottle of soy sauce on the table all the time, and I never understood why until I looked into family history and realized that this was what was happening. You're sharing your what you have in your community, and you're sharing recipes, you're sharing what you use in your household. So we always had a bottle of soy sauce. I feel naked when I don't have a bottle of soy sauce in my refrigerator now. It feels weird, like I'm missing something, a part of my family history. So what's happening is cuisines are starting to fuse. So in our house, I make Mexican rice for dinner, put it in the fridge if we have leftovers, and in the morning, I take it out and I take my frying pan out and I scramble a couple of eggs, throw in some Mexican rice and chop some green onions and put it in there, add a little soy sauce. This is something that my mother did. This is something that my grandmother did. Why? Because you're fusing cuisines. This is what's happening. You're creating these community fusion foods, if you have, if you will. So this is what's happening. So this, and I've looked up this recipe many times, and there isn't anything called Mexican fried rice in any known cookbook. So this is something that clearly was picked up through what was happening and who was living in the barrios. So the need to assimilate. So in the early part of the 1900s, Jesus Terrazas came to Santa Paula with his family, and he started a business called the Sanitary Bakery. Think about that, Sanitary Bakery. It's clean, it's pristine, it's disinfected. Because why is he doing this? Well, because he's catering to a new clientele. I don't know if you can see the calendar on your screen that's up there, but it's actually an image that we have this calendar in our collection at the museum. And it says Sanitary Bakery, compliments of Sanitary Bakery and Grocery, Jesus Terrazas. Pruebe usted nuestro pan mexicano, es el mejor y más limpio de la ciudad. So what he's saying is this is the best Mexican bread. It's the cleanest in the city. Why? Because he's catering to a new clientele. There are white people living in Santa Paula more than there are Mexican people. So he has to make sure that his bakery is clean and suitable to their tastes. And what is he doing? He's not only baking pan dulce and bolillos, rolls, but he's making cookies. If you can see the recipe book, this is part of a ledger book that he had with all his recipes that we have at the museum. And you can see it's lemon cookies, C-U-K-I-S cookies, and fruit cookies. And then at the bottom, it's a coffee cake corriente, so a simple coffee cake. This is an amazing ledger book that we have. It is all that's left of the bakery that was destroyed in the St. Francis Dam disaster in 1928. This was in a pie safe at the bakery, and the flood took everything out except for this ledger book. The recipes are in pristine condition. The book is a little yellowed, but there's no running of the ink in there. So it's amazing. And it's such a treasure that we have at the museum with all these recipes.
Has anyone tried baking any of those?
I don't think so. And I'm so anxious to do that. I really want
yes.
to.
Oh, I would love to try.
Yeah, I'll share that with you.
Yes.
So we have, we're skipping over to the 1940s, World War II, tragedy in the 40s, things are happening. Men, especially those in the barrio, are going off to war. Many are not coming back. There's huge losses in families. Women are going off they're working in the packing houses, and they're also working, a lot of women that are living in Santa Paula, Fillmore, Piru are working at Burmite, which is a munitions plant in Newhall. And so it's a difficult time for everybody. And during this time, my grandfather dies, and my grandmother is left without a source of income, even though she has children. So she's trying to figure out what to do. So she decides that she's going to start making tortillas, and she contacts my uncle, who is now grown, married, and he has a grocery store in Piru. And she tells him what she is planning to do. And he says, okay. So he looks for this tortilladora, which is the tortilla making machinery that you see in the upper left-hand corner. And he finds it and brings it to her. So she starts the process of making her masa and making tortillas. So she started producing nixtamal, which is a softened corn, and that makes the corn dough. So she would work with my mother and her other younger daughter, and then two of my nieces who were living with her at the time. So they'd start the production on Friday nights, and they'd boil a large tub of water with a cal, the calcium carbonate, to make nixtamal. And then on Saturday mornings, they take this softened corn that was rinsed, and it was ground up. And then they added water to that to make the masa, and they drop it on the press on the conveyor belt that you see there. And they'd finally cook them on the griddle. There was a griddle attached to this that cooked the tortillas. And then they were counted, and they were wrapped and sold by the dozens. And she was really known for these tortillas because they were thick and they had a hint of a lime flavor. So she would make them, and then during the holidays, she would make tamales too, or just sell the masa for the tamales. It became the corn tortillas are a mainstay of Mexican food, so it became a huge business. And she started selling to neighbors, and then my uncle would sell in his store in Piru, and all of a sudden she's selling at the stores in other little stores in Fillmore and the stores in Santa Paula. So even though she never gave a name to her business, she was selling these tortillas. And it's not just Mexican people getting these; other people are getting these tortillas as well. So it was great to bring this cottage industry. So the tortilla, she was saved by the tortilla. She was given a second chance at a survival by making tortillas. And I'm very proud to say that this tortilladora is now at the Smithsonian, and it's actually a part of their permanent food exhibit, and it is on display, and it's just amazing to see that there. So after the war, what's going on? Well, women are coming back, munitions plants are closing, and what's left for women? Braceros are here, they're in the fields. So in the small towns in Ventura County, the only jobs that are available for women of color are the packing house or cleaning house. The cleaning houses, so domestics or working on the packing house line. And my mother, who is in the middle on the picture on the right, and these are two of her friends who also cleaned houses. They were all domestics. My mother started at the packing house, and she would catch cold very often because it was pretty cold in there. She used to catch cold easily. So she decided the only thing left for her was to go into doing housework. And my grandmother, she was in her senior year in high school, and my grandmother pulled her out of school because she needed her to work. So that's what she did for her entire life. So that was it. If you're a woman, if you were a person of color, that's what you had to do. Very, very few women of color. If you were very light skinned, you could maybe go work in a dress shop, or you could work as a secretary if you had the skills. But those jobs were few and far between. You didn't get that opportunity very often. So what's happening? So the girls, as they were called, they did housework. They were called the girls, never women. They would never reach that level. They had to be girls. So they would work long days, 10, 12-hour days. And my mother said she would start her day very early in the morning. She would get to work before 7, make breakfast for the family, get the kids ready for school, or take care of the little ones that didn't go to school, and then spend the day there, and would not leave until after she finished making dinner for the family. So she had to learn. My mother was born in Fillmore, so she had, she knew how to cook some, dishes that were not Mexican food. And then her Mexican food was very Americanized by this time. So she learned to make her Mexican dishes palatable for American taste. She would make the enchiladas with lots of tomato sauce and a little bit of chili sauce, but she'd make tostadas, tacos, and of course she made Spanish rice for her ladies because they didn't want to eat Mexican rice. They needed to eat Spanish rice. Here we go again with the Spanish rice. So what's happening is she's creating this for them, and my grandmother is at home, and she's telling her, well, and your ladies, what do they eat? Why don't you get some recipes for them? Bring the recipes here so we can try that food. So my mom's like, okay, well, so she's asking questions, and they're coming up with things like, they had pork sausage and rice casserole, and casseroles big, lots of Midwesterners, casseroles, noodles and mushroom soup, and this thing called Viva la Chicken, which I still have this recipe for, that my mother got in the 1950s. And it's a chicken breast and tortilla casserole, and it's not bad. And lemon pies, lemon meringue pies, lemon cream pies. My mother learned how to make goulash and Jell-O salad, which I absolutely hate to this day. So, I was telling the class before that it was so nice. I had friends and neighbors that were making Jell-O salad, and they put fruit in it, and it was great. Not my mother. My mother used to put everything but fruit in her Jell-O. We had Jell-O salad with avocado, aguacates, tomates. We had avocado with pimento stuffed olives, and it was just horrible. but she thought it was cool because she was becoming Americanized and her cooking was becoming Americanized. And it's like, oh my gosh. So this is what's happening in the 60s. My mother's working as a housekeeper. A lot of Mexican women are, and they're getting these recipes from their ladies, the patronas. So what's happening? Well, you're colonizing the Mexican diet all of a sudden. So this is the ultimate time when it becomes colonized. The picture on the right that you see is a photograph taken at my grandmother's house for Thanksgiving dinner in the 1960s, probably about 1961, 62. If you look at the table, you can see the salad. There's some rolls, not bolillos, just dinner rolls. You can see a bucket of beer or champagne, mashed potatoes around the table. I can guarantee that there was no Mexican food at that Thanksgiving dinner. My family was trying so hard to assimilate. They're trying to desegregate themselves. They're trying to fit in to this, this community. Many small communities in Ventura County at this time were very segregated. But if you were like them or acted like them, like white people, then you might be accepted to some degree. So this is what they're trying to do. They're trying to get out of the barrio, the flight out of the barrio. So what's happening at this time too in Ventura County is that a lot of tract homes are going up. Tract homes started going up after post-World War II. Ventura County was a little late into the game. So they're happening in the late 1950s, early 1960s. Simple tract homes, inexpensive. So what's happening? Mexicanos, Mexicans that are living in the barrio want to assimilate. So they're starting to buy out of the barrio, then they're buying a tract home. And my family stayed, but a lot of families moved out. So this is what's happening at this time. So there's an expression that we used to use a lot, and it's called getting all high tone, except we didn't pronounce it that way. You pronounced it high tone. You know, you'd say, oh, look at that lady. She's all high tone. She thinks she's all high tone, all dressed up and, you know, dressed to the nines, that kind of thing. But getting all high tone, man, you were trying to assimilate. And some of the Mexicanos, some of my family, there was a definitely a divide in my family where some people were trying to assimilate, other people were trying to keep their Mexican roots, and it was really a difficult time. I remember one of my cousins would always tell everyone she was fair. She wasn't white, but she was fair skin toned, and she dyed my aunt's hair red and told everybody that they were Italian because she was so intent on assimilating and fitting in. She so wanted to fit in with her Anglo friends. So she became Italian for a couple of years. And it caused a lot of headaches for the family and stuff. But it's, you know, basically you're trying to be Americanos, you're trying to be Americans. So this is a family dinner for one of my aunts. It's a 25th anniversary celebration. And the menu consisted of ham, scalloped potatoes, green salad, cocktails. Scotch was the alcoholic choice at this time, champagne and layered cake. And again, no Mexican food. There's no salsa on this table, nothing that you see, because this is a fancy dinner and you're trying to you're trying to fit in. But if you look at the family that's around the table, they're uncomfortable. They're not relaxed. They're like, well, which fork should I pick up? And where's my tortilla? Because I don't have anything to eat with here. If you notice, there's a gentleman in the front of the picture who's Anglo, and he was married to my cousin who's sitting next to him in the blue dress. So the families are starting to intermarry, which was a big deal in my family. You had to go and get my grandmother's blessing before you could, and she didn't like this intermarriage. There was a lot. There was a lot of hoops you had to go through. And if that person that you were marrying was white and not Catholic, there was even more rigmarole. There was more paperwork to go through. It was very difficult during this time. So this is all happening. This is all happening during the 60s. So in 1966, Alan Hooker arrives a few years prior to this in Ojai. He's coming from the East Coast and he arrives in Ojai. And he decides that he wants to set up a restaurant. And he's a vegetarian, which is very different and unusual. So he decides to open a restaurant called the Ranch House in Ojai. And he tries to make it a vegetarian restaurant and tries to make it work. And a few people come and a lot of people don't. So he's realizing he has to do something to get this restaurant on track. So he talks to some of the Mexican ladies that are living in Ojai at the time. And he asks them if they'll share their recipes with him, because he figures some of these recipes he could probably adapt to a vegetarian if he needed to. So of course, he goes to one woman and she tells him how to make enchiladas. So he goes to his restaurant and he tries making the enchiladas, and it's not working because the enchiladas are not rolling. They're not, he's trying to roll the tortilla and it's just breaking, or it goes and he talks to some. Didn't she tell you you had to warm the tortillas to make it more pliable, that you have to, put a little oil in a pan and maybe fry it a little bit before you make this? So she said, no, she didn't tell me that at all. She goes, well, clearly she didn't want to give you the directions to do it the right way. So he finally gets the directions right to making his enchiladas at the Ranch House, and they're a huge hit. So what happens? He's got vegetarian cuisine, he's got Mexican cuisine. Who's coming to the restaurant? Because it's a high-end restaurant. Hollywood is coming. Movie stars are coming to the Ranch House, and they love the cooking. So one day, and he's got a great herb garden in the back where he's growing all these herbs that he uses in his cooking, and it's a beautiful place. And so one day he gets a visit from an actor from Hollywood named Anthony Quinn. You may or may not recognize that name. I think your profe does. So Anthony Quinn was of Mexican and Irish descent. And he tells Alan Hooker, he says, well, have you ever heard of cilantro? And he says, well, just a minute. So he goes down to his herb garden and he picks this herb and he brings it back up to him. And Anthony Quinn looks at it and it's like, oh, no, this isn't it. This is culantro. Culantro is a Costa Rican herb, and it's a little bit stronger smelling and stronger in taste than cilantro. So Anthony Quinn brings Alan Hooker on his next trip to Ojai. He brings him some coriander seeds, some cilantro seeds, and Alan Hooker plants this in his herb garden, and he starts growing cilantro, which I think is such a great story, because here's this man, he totally just takes Anthony Quinn's word for it, that this is a great herb to have, and he starts using cilantro. And this is kind of the start of the cilantro. You notice that before 1966, 1967, we're not even using cilantro. My family didn't use cilantro for anything. I didn't even know what it was. And all of a sudden, cilantro is taking the lead over oregano and tomillo and those kind of herbs. It's a whole different taste. So I know this is a little bit out of context. It's not in the right chronological order, but I wanted to talk a little bit about the braceros. Now, the braceros came in during World War II, and they stayed until 1963, and many stayed until later than 1963, and some of them intermarried. They married with a lot of the women that were here. My mother married my father. My father was a bracero, and he stayed because he got married to my mother. So what's happening is that these braceros are being put up in these camps, labor camps, and the food isn't so great. My father started his career in Yuba City, and he, to his dying day, would never have a hot cake or pancake, because that's all he got for breakfast every day for as many years as he was in Yuba City. Well, that's what he had for breakfast, hotcakes, period. No eggs, no bacon, nothing else, just hotcakes. And he couldn't stand it. They were not fed well in any labor camps that I know of. And my father, later on, after he married my mother, he worked for the packing houses, and he worked taking picking crews out to their locations in the fields, and he took his cuadrilla, as he would call it. I went with him many times, many summers I spent with a cuadrilla. And he would always have my mother up early in the morning, and she would make burritos. And she kept telling him, well, what am I doing this for? You get me up early in the morning, I have to make all these burritos. And he says, never mind, just make them, just keep making them. Well, she found out later that he was making all these burritos to take to his men, his picking crew, because their food was so bad, what they were eating. They would have these large metal canisters that were supposed to keep the food warm. And by the time they ate at lunchtime, they were cold, and they were tacos. So they would be with a corn tortilla, with a smear of beans and a lot of chile, or a little bit of meat and a lot of chile, and cold. They were, so my dad would trade them, their tacos, for his burritos that he made that my mother made at home. And he would bring these home to us, these tacos he would bring home, and just so that we could see what they were eating and how bad they were. And they were totally unedible. So, it's amazing. So what was happening is these men are living in the labor camps, and they're learning how to cook. And then they're getting married, and they're teaching their Mexican American wives how to cook authentic Mexican food again. What they had lost in assimilating to American culture, all of a sudden, they're learning to cook again. My father was an excellent cook. I learned to cook from my father, not my mother. My mother's food was very Americanized by the time I came around. So my father taught me everything. I told the class before us, we were eating huitlacoche, corn fungus, way before it became high-end Mexican food. Flor de calabaza, squash blossom quesadillas, everything like that. My dad made a vicious fish soup, just wonderful foods. And he would tell me the stories behind each of these foods. And it was some great stories and great cultural things that I learned from him. And these men were doing the same things with their wives. My aunts were being taught to cook from their bracero husbands as well, because they had to do this in order to survive. The food in the camps was so bad. So we're starting to go back now to, at this point in time, to real Mexican food. So in Ventura, Richard Ortega and Virginia Ortega decide to open up a tortilla shop in what is now called Valdez Alley, across the street from the museum, catty corner to the museum. So Ortega's tortilla shop sold tortillas. He made corn tortillas and enchiladas and tamales. It was a little bit of a little delicatessen. And then he also had another Mexican restaurant in Ojai. So one day he decides he wants to add something to the menu, and he decides to refry some beans, put it in a corn tortilla, roll it up, and fry it. Once it's out of the fryer, he puts cheese on top and a thin, spicy tomato sauce. And the corn burrito is born in Ventura County. The corn burrito is strictly Ventura County cuisine, right out of the 805. This is it. This is what we have. You will not find corn burritos anywhere else unless somebody's making them in their house. They're not anywhere else in the United States. And if you look it up on Wikipedia, same thing. They were born in Ventura, and Richard Ortega is the one who invented these. So what's happening? People are coming in, they're eating the corn burritos, they love them. So all of a sudden, the guy from Foster's Freeze Drive-In says, hey, teach me how to make these. So Richard Ortega sends his daughters, Jackie and Jerry, to Foster's Freeze, teaches them how to roll the tortillas, make the corn burritos. And all of a sudden, he's getting calls from all these other drive-ins, Merle's Drive-In that had 2 locations in Ventura, and other restaurants and drive-ins in Ventura. And these girls are going out, they're teaching him how to make these corn burritos. He's willing to share the recipe, so it's great. But this is something that is strictly a Ventura County creation.
How are those different from, like, are they taquitos, the way that they're rolled up in the corn tortillas, or are they different?
They're rolled up like a taquito, but never tell a corn burrito aficionado that it's a taquito, because it's not. They'll tell you, oh no, girl, this is a corn burrito. So
Okay,
never,
got it.
yes. Yes, no, that's the T word is a bad word, but it is. It's like a
Okay.
taquito, except it doesn't have beef or chicken. It has the beans in it, and always
Gotcha.
pinto beans, never black beans. And the cheese, there's only so much cheese you can put on it. If you don't drench it in the sauce. You don't put too much cheese on it. It has to have just the right amount of cheese and just the right amount of sauce. And honestly, my husband and I just tried the corn burritos at BJ's in Saticoy a couple of weeks ago, and they're really good. So those by far are the
Okay.
best.
Good to know. All right.
So again, here's Richard Ortega creating Americanized Mexican food. And a lot of restaurants around Ventura County were creating this food because they knew that this is what was going to bring white customers in. Ernesto's restaurant, they just had a few things on the menu: chile verde, carne con chile colorado, a taco dinner, tamales, and beef enchiladas. You also see a lot of Mexican restaurants that are serving hamburgers. They want to offer something for everyone, so it'll bring people in. One of the most anglicized Mexican restaurants that I knew growing up was the Casa Mañana in Santa Paula. So for a long time, Las Quince Letras, that was owned by Familia Diaz in Santa Paula, was the place to go. It had real, authentic Mexican food. And then Casa Mañana came to town in the 60s. It was very high end. It's like you didn't go there if you weren't white. We went there, I think, once with a family group, and that was it, because it was clear that this was for a white clientele, and the food was very, very Americanized, Spanish rice, the whole bit. So we went to Las Quince Letras or Familia Diaz because that was where we knew we should be going. So even there, you're seeing segregation in restaurants. Some restaurants were just not for a certain clientele, even Mexican restaurants. So as we now get into the later part of our talk, we're talking about local foods, things that are totally local. This is something that's so new to us, but it's happening more and more. So some of the top foods in the county right now are strawberries, raspberries, avocados, lemons, oranges, celeries, tomatoes, cabbage, onions, and we're growing a lot more herbs and chiles in Ventura County. So there's more opportunities for us to bring more authentic foods and authentic Mexican cuisine to the table, because we have accessibility to a lot more foods than we did. And not just foods from produce stands or farmers markets. At the end of the Bracero program, Mixtecos began coming in from Oaxaca. I didn't realize that it was that soon that they were coming into Ventura County. When I met my husband in 1979, he invited me to have dinner with his family at their home. And his mother had lived most of her life in Oaxaca. So she cooked like a Oaxacan cook. I had no idea what I was eating. I had never had any of these foods before. The moles were delicious, but I had never had mole like that. I didn't know what a tlayuda was. Black beans. We never had black beans at home. So even something as simple as that. But I really appreciated learning about Oaxacan cooking, especially from my mother-in-law. Then in 1994, you had a larger migration of Mixtecos and some Zapotecos into Ventura County because of NAFTA and the devaluation of the Mexican peso. So all of a sudden, Oaxacan food has become more prevalent in our county. Oaxacan restaurants are popping up all over the place, and the food is delicious. And chapulines, of course, one of my favorite things to eat. If you like eating grasshoppers, they're delicious. They're wonderful. My grandkids think that they taste like beef jerky, so they love eating them. And what a wonderful thing that we're getting all this new cuisine into Ventura County as well. The supermarkets that are bringing a variety of goods to us, like Vallarta markets and other markets that are not just catering to Mexican taste, but also other Latino cultures as well, Nicaraguan foods and Guatemalan foods in the markets. I like to take my colleagues on field trips to Vallarta before the pandemic, just so that they can get a chance to see what a real Mexican market is like, with all the flavors, the colors, and the the sounds, and I think it's a great place to find, you know, whatever you want. Panaderias, paleterias are now more prevalent because of the influx of immigrants coming in. So there's a greater need for more food-related businesses in Ventura County. And a lot of non-native people are seeking authentic Mexican food and pastries and treats. La Michoacana paleterias are all over. You have a lot of little Mexican bakeries that are very popular now. So when I was little and living in Fillmore, we used to have to drive to Oxnard to La Central Bakery to get our pan dulce because there was nothing in Fillmore or Santa Paula. This is where we had to go. There just was you know, an occasional panaderia that you would find, but it was very few and far between. We used to go to LA a couple of every 2 weeks or so to visit my Nina, and we would buy our bolillos, our rolls there, and keep them because that's the only place we could find bolillos. So we don't have that issue anymore. We can find them everywhere now. I've started making my own pan dulce with my grandson, and it's, you know, it's a process, but it's easier than I thought it would be, and it's really delicious. I really enjoy doing that.
Are there any places that you know of in the area that sell like the Mexican candy apples that are covered in chamoy and tajin? And there's one that's covered in cajeta and mazapan. I know they came out of the Ventura area, but I can't find exactly where. But that's
I don't think so. I was thinking maybe the La Michoacana, but I don't think so.
Yeah, I've checked there, and they don't. Not the one on the avenue. They don't have them there.
There's one by Vallarta Market in Oxnard. I'm not sure if they have them there or not, but yeah, those are hard to find. Not in LA, but here they are. Yes, definitely. Wow, I'll have to be on the lookout for those. Those are good.
Yeah. Yes, very good.
So we talked a little bit about elevated Mexican cuisine, like the huitlacoche, the corn fungus that people are saying is like the black truffle of Mexico. And we also have the flor de calabaza and purslane, such a little plain herb as purslane, verdolagas, which I absolutely love to cook with. So all of a sudden you see this rise in high-end Mexican restaurants and regional cocktails like mezcal bars and tequila bars and everything of that nature. And all of a sudden you have the food of the poor people that is elevated to high cuisine, the huitlacoche and everything else that I mentioned. And then street food. Street food is given a place at the table. You have esquites and tacos, pastor, birria, caldos. So the menu that you see there is from a restaurant called Nopalito in San Francisco that we go to every time we visit the city. And you can see they have esquite and birria over on the right. I don't think you can see it, but there's a caldo tlalpeño. So quesadilla de calabaza. So, you know, it's just amazing how the cuisine has changed and how people are yearning for this, you know, going back to these roots. Nothing wrong with Americanized Mexican food if you like it. And I like some things that are, you know, very Americanized, and, you know, I don't mind having French fries in my burritos or whatever. But it's interesting that we now have a choice. We now have choices for this. So yeah, we're going back to our roots during pandemic times. So I was telling the other class that I'll tell you a little bit about my household. So my daughter and son-in-law moved in with their 3 children prior to the pandemic to save money to buy a house. So when we had to go into lockdown mode, I'm all of a sudden finding myself in a house with 8 people. And it's a challenge to stay safe in that environment. And I know that a lot of Latinos are getting COVID-19 because of the size of their households. There are a lot of people in the house. And but we have been luckily staying safe. We do a lot of hand washing. We do a lot of sanitation. We wear masks all the time. And we went back to basic home cooking. We cook at home all the time. We don't go out to eat. We started a backyard garden. The first week that we were in lockdown, my son-in-law and my son began digging in the backyard. And which a lot of people are doing, as I can see on Facebook and Instagram, that people are into planting. And we keep meals simple, and we buy less meat than we used to. We eat less meat than we used to. We use a lot of vegetables from our garden, and we plan our meals around that. We eat a lot of beans and rice, and we realize that we need to change our diets. I don't know a lot about decolonization of, my diet yet, but I'd like to learn more about that. But we do have to change our diets because our planet is definitely changing, and we have to be very aware of that and respectful of what Mother Nature has given us and Mother Earth is giving us. So, I see a lot of changes in that during this pandemic time. So in conclusion, I just wanted to tell you that Mexican food continues to be a fusion of different cuisines, from European influences to indigenous ingredients, or ingredients that our ancestors and recipes that our ancestors discovered here. Not all Americanized Mexican food is bad. Some is. Don't eat the Jell-O salad. And we create our own food culture. Mexican food is what you make it. Like I said, from French fries and burritos to Sinaloa Mexican sushi, which I love. And don't forget, we were putting avocado on tacos and toast before they started charging $10 in it in restaurants. So we were the first. And I just want to say thank you to Victor Valle and his book, Recipe of Memory. It started my love of food history. And Charles Nelson Johnson, who is a colleague of mine at the museum, for his help in editing my text and providing images for this. And special thanks to my friend and compadre, Gustavo Arellano Miranda, and his book, Taco USA, for all our great conversations about food history, and tortillas. And thank you so much for listening and for being here. And I'm honored to be here and spending some time with your class. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Anna. That was amazing. And the conversation on chat was just like off the charts. So, so I'm just really happy that everybody's just super engaged. So and just, like I said at the last session, cooking for your family is also like part of this ceremony, right? Of like this ofrenda of love, for our familias, instead of like comiendo en la calle all the time, like eating in this like street food all the time. Although street food, I mean, it's bomb, we got to admit it's bomb. But also like, don't forget to, that cooking isn't just a chore. It's a special offering that you're creating for your family, right? And that we have to cook it with love. And so, and also wanted to just kind of give everybody a heads up about the book, Decolonize Your Diet, as Anna was referring to, how do we decolonize and then learn about the history of our foods. And so in that book, Decolonize Your Diet, also talks about like the history of how the foods of our indigenous ancestors were colonized and even outlawed. A lot of the foods were outlawed because our ancestors had ceremonies to give thanks to a lot of these foods that were very rich in nutrients and sustain them. And because they had ceremonies to give thanks to these foods, then of course the Spaniards saw that as something evil and demonic, and we already know that story. And so they did not allow them to have these ceremonies, one, and two, they didn't allow them to even eat these foods anymore. So when you look at history and even the history of colonization, or the history of the social political circumstances of our people, like, and you look at that through that lens of food, it's very interesting, right? Because we can look at it through so many different lenses, but even looking at it through this lens is very, very interesting. So I want to open it up to the rest of you. So go ahead and ask your questions. Now's your time.
What was, sorry. So sorry. What was your first Mexican dish that you ever made? Like you ever made yourself? Yeah, for yourself.
Oh my gosh. Let me see, by myself.
Yeah, without no help or anything.
Without any help. Okay, so without any help, dude, that's a tough one. But I probably enchiladas, because they're fairly easy to do.
Yeah.
I was fearful of, I was afraid of rice for a long time.
Oh, rice is so easy.
Yeah, but not, it isn't. So enchiladas, because they were easy. I know I didn't like them because they splattered if you fried the tortillas. But my mom taught me, she was patient and she taught me how to do them. So I started making them since I was probably about 13 or 14.
Oh, awesome.
But rice, eluded me for a long time until I don't think I made rice on my own until I got married. And then my mom was like, okay, you got to do this, girl. So
Ya te puedes casar, as they
I
say,
know.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
Rice.
All right, another question.
Hi, thanks so much for coming and talking. And before I ask my question, I just wanted to say, earlier this semester, I had the opportunity to attend your Huelga event, and that was just really amazing. So thank you so much for doing that.
Thank you.
So as you might guess by looking at me, I'm not Chicano. I don't have experience with Mexican food. So how would you suggest that someone like me who doesn't have experience approach the food to try in a respectful way? Also for someone who like I have zero tolerance for spicy food. So how should I approach that?
Well, you know, if we weren't in a pandemic, I would tell you to come over and I'd cook for you. And I would not, I had talked to, your professora about that actually. And I would love to have done this class either in my kitchen or at the kitchen that we have in the museum. There are many ways to go about this. It's difficult when you're going into a Mexican restaurant. I would suggest that you stay away from more Americanized Mexican food, but try something a little different. If you're adventurous and traveling a little bit during this pandemic, there are several restaurants in LA that you could go to that, or even in Oxnard. I don't know if you're interested in trying like regional food, like Oaxacan food. Would you be interested in something like that?
Maybe.
Okay, so you can always, there's always dishes on the menu that are, not all Mexican food is spicy. That's number one. And I think that's the number one thing that we have to get over. There's a lot of Mexican food that isn't spicy. Mm-hmm. So if you want to, your professor can give you my email address and I can send you a list of places that you might want to try, which would be probably a little easy on your wallet and easy on your stomach as well. And that where the food is good and hearty and not too spicy for you. Would that work for you?
Thanks, that would be really great.
Sure, I'd love to do that.
Thank you for offering that, Anna. I'm gonna go ahead and put send them your email now.
Thank you.
All right, another question. We have time for one more question.
So I have a question. So I did hear that you did say that you make pan dulce with your kids. What type of pan dulce do you make? Because I make empanadas myself.
Oh, empanadas are, I so respect you for that because empanadas are difficult to make. My mother used to make empanadas, but I have a hard time with the dough for that. I make conchas because number one, it's my favorite pan dulce. So, and it's easy to make. I make it with my grandchildren. My oldest grandson is 11. So he and I make it together and he's getting really good at it. He's getting better than I am at it. But it's time consuming, but it's good. And I have to tell you a little bit something about that. So there's a bakery in Fillmore called Roan Bakery, ROAN. And it's not a Mexican bakery. It's just a bakery. But she grows, grinds, and makes her own flour, and then she makes her bread. And even if you're on a gluten-free diet, you can eat this bread. It's amazing. It's so good. It's so clean. It's so healthy. I use her flour to make my pan dulce, and it's really amazing. And it's a recipe I found online. I think it's called, if you look up pan dulce, My Cozy Kitchen. It's super easy. It's a super easy recipe. And it's just, if you like conchas, it's really good. And you can incorporate other things into your conchas, other flavorings and stuff. But I just make the basic conchas with, it's got a little bit of cinnamon and some vanilla, but they're really, really good. And they're super easy to make. Once you get through kneading the dough and letting it rise, it's not hard to make at all. But that's what I like to make, the conchas. You'll have to send me your recipe for empanadas.
Yes, I'll go ahead and send you the recipe. I got your email on the chat.
Thank you.
Awesome. And then Alex wants to ask a question.
Yeah, hi Anna. So you mentioned at the beginning that that you're from Guanajuato, and my family is from there too. And I've always asked them if there's like a specific dish that, you know, El Estado de Guanajuato is known for, but they never really like they don't have a concrete answer. Do you know, at least from where you're from in Guanajuato, if there's like a known dish there?
You know what? I wish that I did, but I don't. Again, it's the same as you. My father never gave me a concrete answer for anything. You know, he would make dishes.
Yeah, I feel like they
yes, he would make dishes like verdolagas, the purslane, you know, and he would make, the one thing he did make was like a fish soup, but I don't think that that's just strictly from Guanajuato. And then of course, you know, his salsas and carne asada and that kind of thing. But I think that it was pretty, there wasn't anything specific, not like Oaxaca where you have a very regional cuisine.
Yeah, my
So-
sister-in-law's from Oaxaca, and when she married my brother, like we got introduced into this whole other world, and it's been good ever since.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I do have a couple of friends that are from Guanajuato, so let me ask them, and then can I get back to you on that?
Yeah, I took down your email too, so I can actually shoot you an email later on and
Yes.
see if you've got anything for me.
Shoot me an email because I forget. I have so many things going on. So shoot me an email about that, and then I'll reach out to them and see if we can track this down, because
Okay,
I'd like to know if they're regional foods. Definitely.
thank
Yeah.
you.
You're welcome.
And I think that's an important conversation too, right? Where I think folks, especially folks here in the United States, they think of Mexican food being very narrow. Like it's just tacos and burritos, which burritos aren't even Mexican, and nachos and, you know, like that kind. But like Mexican cuisine is so like wide and there's so many variations. And then you go from region to region and there are foods there that, you know, maybe we've never even tried. Like I'm fairly new to Oaxacan food too. And it's just like, where did this come from? Like, I've never had this in my life, you know, and I'm Mexican, but it's like a whole other chapter to it. So I absolutely love all these different regional foods of Mexico. And so, yeah, it's very, very vast, very, very vast. And the cuisine is amazing. So I love it. Okay, y'all. So we are at time unless there are any last minute pressing things that anybody wants to say or ask. Okay, so again, I really, really appreciate the chat going on because there's so many ideas. And here's the other thing that was going on in the chat, Anna, just so you know, everybody was like, hey, you got to hit this food truck and you got to hit this spot. They make this there and this there. So it's even like the continued evolution of like these foods and these fusions of foods, right, that are continuing. And there's so many good spots everywhere. So now like I have a whole long list of things that I'm going to go try out. So thank you, students, for, for sharing all the hot spots.
Yeah, we were just in LA yesterday, and we see this like was it Indian Mexican fusion cuisine, and it's just like, oh my gosh, we have to try this. There's so many, it's so many pairings. I remember when Roy Choi first had his the Koji food truck, which is a Korean Mexican. That was back in the day, one of the first food trucks around. So yeah, we've come a long way since then.
Yeah. So again, thank you so much for your expertise, for sharing all of this, for your love of food and history and cultura. Thank you, and I appreciate you. And thank you to the rest of you as well for being here, being presente as always. And so go enjoy some good food right now. And I hope that you enjoy it with loved ones. And we'll see you all on Wednesday. Thank you again, everybody, for your prayers and text messages and all that good stuff. I really appreciate you. So if you want to go ahead and unmute yourself to give your thank yous and goodbyes, and we'll see you on Wednesday.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Thank you.
Ms. Gomez, I just have a quick comment. On Wednesday, isn't it Veterans Day or something?
Oh, yes, you're right.
Oh, yeah, no, school.
Veterans Day on Wednesday. Thank you for the reminder, Arlene. So I'll see you all in a week on Monday. Okay, so enjoy your time off. Okay, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Yeah.
Bye.